Hey y'all, Matt here, and today we're talking about polygamy. This is a video I promised that I'd put out about a week ago, and it's a topic that comes up a lot. A lot of times when people read through Genesis, this is a question that comes up, and it puzzles them. And one thing that they want to know is the Bible saying that polygamy is okay? Because it doesn't really, when mentioning these men that take on multiple wives, it doesn't seem to necessarily address it. It doesn't come out and say, hey, this is a bad thing or this is a good thing. And so we have to look at the totality of Scripture, and we have to look at these situations to try to see if this is something that the Bible agrees with or if it doesn't agree with. What polygamy basically means is for somebody to take on multiple spouses, multiple husbands, multiple wives. Typically, it's a man taking on multiple wives. That's what we see in the Scripture, and that's what we typically see like out in the world. It's not a super popular thing in this time, but it does happen. We see it from time to time in a lot of these popular cults that have been, caught a lot of attention over the past years. We see in Genesis 4, verse 19, this is the first time we see polygamy actually happen. We're only 4 chapters into the Bible, and already Lamech takes on 2 wives. And if you read through there, it's kind of a genealogy section, and then it pops out and it says, and Lamech had 2 wives. And there's a reason why it's highlighted, and I'm going to go on and reveal my stance on this. The Bible does not allow for polygamy. But it's something that, as quick as Genesis 4, we've already fallen into sin and people rebelling against God and doing their own things, choosing themselves over the word of the Lord and what the Lord has for them. And this one man basically invents polygamy by taking these 2 wives. Very quickly, we see in Genesis 16, this is one of the things that we talked about before. Sarah, the wife of Abraham, gives Abraham her slave Hagar as an additional wife. And there was a distinct purpose in him taking on this other wife, to provide a son for him that he doubted God on, because God had promised him that they would have a son. And instead of waiting on the Lord, they decided they'd take things into their own hands, and he took an additional wife and he had a kid with her, and it causes nothing but problems for him. A lot of people would attribute this kid that Abraham had out of sin to where Islam has been born. Ishmael, the resulting son in that, is a prominent prophet in Islam. If we go and look at Genesis 29, continuing down the lineage of Abraham, we see that Jacob marries Rachel and Leah. They're 2 sisters. This is also a relationship that it's not something that goes well for them. Just like Abraham and Hagar, or Leah and Rachel, there's a constant tension that we see in Scripture, as one of them's able to have kids and the other one's not, and then it's a constant battle back and forth for power. And this is widely because it's outside of the intended creation and the order that God has for us. In Genesis, God created marriage. He married Adam and Eve, and he even tells us in Genesis 2, verse 24, that marriage is between one man and one woman, and that's the way he intended it. And anything outside of that, while it might satisfy your sin, or it might satisfy trying to get other things, such as a son in a marriage that you think you possibly can't have, it's outside of the way that God has created things. And anytime we step outside of the way God has created and intended things to work, it does not end well. We might be able to get away with it for a little while, but ultimately it's a bad idea. And if you're like me and you've done stuff like this in the past, not polygamy, but stepping outside of God's will, you very, very quickly realize how bad things can go. And the more you actually submit to God and you walk in His ways, the more you can actually see how it's almost as if the things that God are telling us we need to do are there for a reason. It's almost as if He created everything and knows how it works, and He's kind of throwing us a bone by saying, hey, you should do things this way. because one, it's my way and you're going to walk in obedience to me, but two, this is how it's designed to work. And so the Bible never really specifically comes out and addresses these men in these relationships, but we can see from Genesis 2 verse 24 that marriage was designed a specific way and polygamy is outside of that. So polygamy is not something that is part of God's will. And we can also see in these stories in the scripture where men take on multiple wives, it never ends well for them. In the cases of Abraham and Jacob, both wives are always competing with each other, arguing with each other. It causes tension. We see later on in scripture, the historical books, we see King Solomon. He has tons of wives and concubines. And while he starts to be possibly what could have been one of the best earthly kings that Israel has ever seen, he completely fails. And these women actually lead him astray. They lead him away from faith and to worshiping other gods and to chasing all of these things that just don't satisfy the desire that is put in you that only God can fill. So the Bible doesn't specifically address it, but it is a sin. It's something that it doesn't allow for, and scripture is clear on that. But until the next video, I hope you have a good weekend. Love y'all. Blessings.